series decide to portray him now that it had him in the position of tyrant.
Snively, what color is my heart?
I don't see a heart, sir.
Exactly.
Excuse me for a minute, I think I just pissed myself. I mean, seriously, holy crap! There is just no way to describe how frickin' scary this guy can be. There is not an ounce of joy anywhere near this guy. While yes, later on in the series he does get slightly more comedic, he still remains one of the most intimidating villains I have ever seen in a children's show. And he's not even that complex. He is an extraordinarily one-dimensional villain, boiled down to his very base, which is to say he's just pure evil wrapped in human skin. But you know what? Sometimes that's really all you need for a show like this, and he is pulled off perfectly here. It gets even worse when you realize just how obsessed he has gotten with destroying Sonic and his friends. He doesn't just want to see them destroyed, he wants to see them suffer. He wants to see them in pain, dying a slow, horrid death, and he is willing to do anything to make that happen. Of course, while the writing is strong enough to make him seem like an effective villain, it's the voice that really sells this character. Which reminds me, this is probably a voice acting fan's dream come true if you actually take a look at the credits for some of the voice actors in this series. Some of them have been everywhere in the animation business, and I guarantee you that while you might not know some of their names, you have definitely heard their voices at some point during your lives, most likely during your childhood. Let's take a look at some of them, shall we? Now obviously you have Jaleel White reprising his role as Sonic since both cartoons went on at the same time, but you also have Kat Sose playing Princess Sally and Nicole, you have Cree Summers voicing Dulcie the Dragon, you have Rob Paulson of all people voicing Antoine, you have the legendary Jim Cummings voicing Dr. Robotnik, and they even managed to throw in a few celebrity voices as well. Tim Curry, for the few appearances that he's there, voices Sally's father, King Max, in the few episodes where he appears. Now, needless to say, the show has already proven how it could have been a very big success, but of course there are also some smaller details we need to talk about. One of the biggest small details being the music, which again is very, very well done. Of course, most of us are familiar with the theme song just because it is so gosh darn rock your face off awesome, and is basically just singing the praises of our hero, Sonic, but at the same time, most people completely forget about the rest of the soundtrack, which in and of itself was very well done. It's certainly not the kind of thing that you would listen to casually because it's so heavily tied to the scenes that it appears in, but it was very heavily orchestrated and definitely complemented the rest of the scene very, very well. I also want to note that this is one of the few shows aimed at a younger audience that I've seen that understands the power that silence can have, whether it be for comedic or dramatic effect.
Greetings, Dr. Robotnik. Wanna play?
Also, if you really want to talk impressive, talk about the animation and the artwork in this series, which is top tier in almost every regard. If you look back on a lot of other properties that DiC produced, they sort of fall into minimalist categories with very washed out backgrounds and animation that is either repeated or very simplistic. Now this is not always the case, of course, and this is a perfect example of that. There was obviously a lot of detail put into every single aspect of the artwork and the character animation. These backgrounds are just incredible, and the character animations are not only really smooth, but also seem very logical and very believable without resorting to a lot of the cartoon physics that you would expect to see in a series like this. Now, it isn't really perfect. You can see a few small inaccuracies here and there, but it's definitely nowhere on the scale of mistakes you would see on, say, the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, or even Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, which is really impressive considering that this is in the heyday of cell animation for a TV budget, and most places like Disney were the only studios that had access to computer animation without it being really, really expensive for them. If you want to see a perfect encapsulation about just how detailed the animation and the art style can be, take a look at the over-the-top climax to the final episode of the series.
I really hate that hedgehog. I hate him. I hate him. Hate him. Hate, 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 hate.
So you see, it's very easy to see why this series gets so much praise on the internet nowadays, despite the fact that it is, as I said, approaching 2 decades old. It's a remarkable series, and it does a lot with the Sonic the Hedgehog license that a lot of people probably never would have thought about when the first 2 games came out. So with all that being said, I think it's very easy to say that this is by far the best video game adaptation series that you can get for your money, and I can find absolutely nothing wrong with it at all.
Yes! The big round guy finally let Sonic defeat him. Well, don't celebrate too soon, Hedgehog. Now, it's my turn. And I'm not
Right, that scene. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty much an unspoken law of the internet that whenever you're talking about Sonic SatAM, you pretty much have to discuss how it ended. So bear with me here while I lay a bit of history down on you. First off, it needs to be understood that when the series was first airing on ABC, it was not doing very well in the ratings. This was mostly due to a couple of reasons, the first and foremost being that it was constantly being preempted for sports games, so it didn't have a chance to build a consistent viewership. The second and more prevalent reason was the fact that it was playing in the time slot opposite Mighty Morphin Power Rangers on Fox, which of course was the big ratings darling during the time. However, upper management, particularly the CEO of ABC at the time, liked the show and wanted to give it a chance to continue onward, despite the fact that it wasn't really drawing in the viewers that it probably could have. However, around the end of the second season, things started to get a little bit hairy. You see, ABC was in the process of being bought out by Disney at the time, and as such, most of the upper management was fired or let go or just quit altogether, and were replaced by people that Disney wanted sitting on the throne of power. As such, the new CEO was quoted as saying, "A new broom sweeps clean," and after going over the numbers, the series was promptly cancelled, much to the shock of the development team. It wasn't until the series started airing reruns on other channels that people started to realize what they had been missing out on. Of course, such is the tragic case with many underrated classics in animation, or really in television in general. However, perhaps the greatest tragedy here is the fact that the late great Ben Hurst, who was the main writer for a majority of the second season, and who gave us not only the overarching Doomsday plot, but also the epic two-parter Blast from the Past, was also responsible for several pitches in trying to get the show revived. Unfortunately, as you can tell, this never materialized, but afterwards he remained very active in the fanbase for almost the rest of his life, and presented them with several ideas that he had for a Season 3 that just never materialized, stating that he wanted to bring Knuckles in, his plan for Naugus, and certain background characters. It's all pretty fascinating stuff, and he did do a lot of extensive interviews about his time spent on the show. Now, fans have been clamoring for a reboot or a restart to the series for years now, but at this point, I think it's best if we leave the series as it is. It's fantastic the way that it is, and while I certainly wouldn't mind seeing a new entry into this series, I don't think that they could capture the magic that made this series so popular as it was way back when. It would be the same thing as if they canceled My Little Pony now, and then 10 years down the line tried to recapture that magic. I just don't think it would work unless you got a really, really good team to do it. And considering how Sega treats some of the other products that aren't in the main game series, I don't think that's going to happen. So with all that being said, I highly recommend that this series be checked out if you haven't already. Not just for Sonic fans, not just for fans of classic animation, but anybody who grew up during the 90s should watch this cartoon. It really is the kind of thing that feels timeless, despite the fact that, in terms of animation, it is starting to show its age, what with being made on cells and all. So with all of that in mind, where are we going to go from here? Well, I guess I could talk about the Archie series, but that's an entirely different product for another day. With that being said, I think that we'll stick to animation for right now. And while I know there is one more DiC animated series we have to look at, there's something that came between the Saturday morning cartoon and Sonic Underground that we have to look at first. So, get ready, folks, because we're turning our direction east, and we're going to take a look at the first Sonic anime. I'll see you all then.